Captain Alexei Volkov stared at the burning village, his jaw clenched tight. The acrid smoke stung his eyes, but he refused to look away from the devastation his unit had wrought. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. "Sir?" Private Dmitry Sokolov's uncertain voice broke through Alexei's thoughts. "The rest of the unit is ready to move out." Alexei turned to face the young soldier, taking in his soot-stained face and haunted eyes. Dmitry couldn't be more than 19 or 20, hardly more than a boy. What were they doing here? "Tell them to hold position," Alexei ordered. "I need to think." Dmitry hesitated. "But sir, our orders—" "I said hold position, soldier," Alexei snapped. Immediately he regretted his harsh tone. None of this was Dmitry's fault. The private was just following orders like they all were. Orders that had led them to shell this Ukrainian village. Orders that had resulted in the deaths of who knew how many innocent civilians. Orders that Alexei could no longer follow in good conscience. As Dmitry hurried off, Alexei pulled out his phone and opened a secure messaging app. His hands shook slightly as he typed out a brief message. "Its time can no longer be part of this." Seeking extraction for self and sympathetic unit members, he hit send before he could second-guess himself. There was no going back now. Within moments, a reply came through. "Understood. Coordinates incoming. Be ready to move quickly." Alexei took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Then he strode purposefully back to where his unit waited. "Listen up," he called out. The soldiers snapped to attention, eyeing him warily. They could sense something was different. "I know many of you have doubts about this mission, about this entire war. I'm giving you a choice. Those who wish to continue following the Kremlin's orders, you're free to go. I won't stop you. But those who want to stand for what's right, I'm offering you a chance to defect, to join the Ukrainian forces and fight against this unjust invasion." A ripple of shock went through the assembled troops. Several immediately raised their weapons, aiming at Alexei. "This is treason," shouted Lieutenant Popov. "Stand down immediately or we'll be forced to execute you." Alexei raised his hands slowly. "I understand your position, Yuri, but I'm asking you to really think about what we're doing here. Is this what you signed up for when you joined the army? Destroying villages, killing civilians, following the orders of corrupt oligarchs and a power-mad dictator?" He saw uncertainty flicker across several faces. "Good," he pressed on. "I'm not asking you to betray Russia. I'm asking you to stand up for the real ideals of our homeland, for justice and freedom, for the people, not the powerful elites who are profiting from this bloodshed." Private Sokolov was the first to lower his weapon. "I'm with you, Captain," he said quietly. One by one, other soldiers followed suit. In the end, about 2/3 of the unit chose to stand with Alexei. The rest, led by Lieutenant Popov, backed away with their weapons still raised. "You're making a huge mistake," Popov warned. "You'll all be branded as traitors and executed if you're caught." "The only mistake was following illegal orders to attack civilians," Alexei replied evenly. "You're free to go report us. We'll be long gone by the time reinforcements arrive." With a final glare, Popov and the loyal soldiers retreated. Alexei turned to address those who remained. "Thank you for your courage," he said. "I know this wasn't an easy choice, but I believe it's the right one. We have coordinates for an extraction point where we'll rendezvous with Ukrainian forces. Gather only essential gear and supplies. We move out in 10 minutes." As the soldiers scrambled to prepare, Alexei pulled Dmitry aside. "I'm putting a lot of trust in you, Private," he said. "I need you to be my second in command for this. Can you handle it?" Dmitry squared his shoulders and nodded firmly. "Yes, sir, I won't let you down." Alexei clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man. Now let's get moving before our former comrades bring the hammer down on us." The next 48 hours were a blur of tense travel, avoiding patrols and praying their luck would hold. They abandoned their vehicles early on, traveling on foot through forests and fields to avoid detection. Finally, they reached the rendezvous point, an abandoned farm near the Ukrainian border. As they approached cautiously, a group of armed men emerged from the dilapidated barn. Alexei raised his hands. "We're the defectors," he called out in careful Ukrainian. "Captain Alexei Volkov, we're here to join your cause." A stocky man with a graying beard stepped forward. "I'm Colonel Taras Shevchenko, Ukrainian Army. We've been expecting you." He switched to Russian. "I must say, we were surprised to get your message. It's not often we have an entire unit of Russian soldiers volunteer to switch sides." These are dangerous times, Alexei replied. Sometimes they call for drastic choices. Shevchenko nodded. Indeed. Well, you'll all need to be debriefed thoroughly, of course. But first, let's get you some food and rest. You look dead on your feet. As they were led into the barn, which had been converted into a makeshift base, Alexei felt some of the tension finally leave his body. They had made it. The hard part was just beginning, but at least now they had a fighting chance to make things right. Over the next few weeks, Alexei and his men went through an intense vetting process. They were interrogated extensively about their motivations, knowledge of Russian military operations, and willingness to actively fight against their former comrades. It was grueling, but Alexei understood the necessity. He answered every question as honestly as he could, holding nothing back. I joined the army because I believed in serving my country, he explained during one session. I was proud to wear the uniform. But this invasion, it goes against everything I thought we stood for. We were told we were liberating Ukraine from neo-Nazis and Western oppression. Instead, I've seen us destroying homes, killing innocents, becoming the very oppressors we claim to be fighting. The Ukrainian intelligence officer nodded. And you're prepared to take up arms against Russian forces, to potentially kill soldiers who were once your brothers in arms? Alexei met his gaze steadily. I take no joy in that prospect, but yes, I'll do whatever is necessary to stop this illegal and immoral invasion. My true brothers are those who stand for justice and freedom, not those who blindly follow corrupt leaders. In the end, Alexei and most of his men were cleared to join the Ukrainian forces. A few were deemed security risks and interned, but treated humanely. Alexei couldn't fault the Ukrainians for their caution. Colonel Shevchenko personally welcomed them to the ranks. Your knowledge of Russian tactics and equipment will be invaluable, he told Alexei. I'm assigning your men to various units where they can be most effective, but I have a special task in mind for you, Captain. So whatever you need, sir, Alexei replied. Shevchenko smiled grimly. How would you like to send a message to your old bosses in the Kremlin? The plan was audacious, perhaps even reckless, but Alexei had to admit it had style. He stood before a camera, dressed in his Russian uniform, but with Ukrainian patches prominently displayed. To either side of him stood Dmitry and several of his other men, similarly attired. My name is Captain Alexei Volkov, he began, staring directly into the lens. Until recently, I commanded a unit in the Russian Army's 76th Guards Air Assault Division. I come before you today to announce that my men and I have made the decision to defect to Ukrainian forces. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he continued, his voice gaining strength and conviction. We can no longer follow the illegal and immoral orders of the Kremlin regime. We did not join the army to be part of an invasion force. We did not sign up to shell villages and kill civilians. The Russian people are being fed lies about the nature of this conflict. This is not a peacekeeping mission or an operation to liberate Ukraine. It is an unjustified war of aggression, and we refuse to be part of it any longer. Alexei recounted the horrors he had witnessed, the false reasons for the invasion, and its devastating impact on Ukrainian civilians and Russian soldiers alike. To my fellow soldiers still obeying the Kremlin, open your eyes, he implored. You're being used by corrupt leaders who don't care about your lives or innocent lives. Lay down your arms. Refuse this criminal war. To those who can't stomach this invasion, there's another path. Ukraine will welcome those who stand for justice and freedom, he continued passionately. He appealed directly to the Russian public. Demand the truth from your leaders. End this senseless bloodshed. Russia's future depends on citizens standing up against the Putin regime's lies and corruption. As the camera turned off, Alexei sighed deeply. Colonel Shevchenko patted his shoulder approvingly. Well done, the Ukrainian officer said. This should stir things up in Moscow. Alexei nodded gravely. Let's hope it reaches the right ears. In his luxurious Kremlin office, Vladimir Putin watched Alexei's defection speech with rage, his face contorted. Traitors, he shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. Cowards and traitors. His advisors shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Putin's wrath. How did this happen? Putin demanded. How did we allow an entire unit to defect and spread lies? Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu cautiously responded, We're still investigating, sir. Captain Volkov was in contact with Ukrainian intelligence. I don't want excuses, Putin cut him off. I want these traitors found and punished. Ensure this never happens again. Understood, Mr. President, Shoigu replied quickly. We're tightening frontline communication monitoring and boosting our media campaign. Putin dismissed him with a wave. Yes, handle it. We cannot allow dissent. The consequences for defectors must be severe and public, understood? The officials nodded vigorously, suppressing any doubts about the war's wisdom. As they hurried to comply, Putin stared out at the Moscow skyline. Volkov and his traitors would pay dearly. No one defied Putin and escaped unscathed. Meanwhile, Alexei and his men integrated into the Ukrainian military, using their knowledge to anticipate Russian moves. Alexei collaborated closely with Colonel Shevchenko, who initially distrusted the former enemy but grew to respect him. I admit you've surprised me, Shevchenko said one evening. I half expected you to be a double agent. Alexei smiled wryly. I hope to prove my loyalty. You have, Shevchenko assured him. Do you regret leaving your homeland? Alexei pondered. I love Russia, but not the Russia Putin has created. I have no regrets. I wish more Russians saw the truth. Well said. Call me Taras, Shevchenko offered, signaling the end of formalities. Now, let's plan how to push your old comrades back, Alexei replied, feeling renewed purpose. Weeks turned into months. Alexei's defection video stirred both Russia and the world, spreading online despite state media denouncing him. It inspired a trickle of Russian soldiers to desert, enough to worry the Kremlin and lift Ukrainian morale. Alexei continued to vex his former leaders, appearing in media to debunk Kremlin propaganda and aid Ukrainian forces with his insights. But the war weighed heavily on him. He found solace with Taras, who became a close friend. Are we making a difference? Alexei wondered one evening. For every soldier who deserts, 10 more replace them. Taras encouraged him. We are making a difference. Every life saved, every territory held, it all matters. Hold on to hope. Alexei appreciated Taras's optimism, though he felt something big needed to change. That change came unexpectedly. A coup attempt in Moscow, with military leaders opposing Putin due to the war's disastrous progress. For days, chaos reigned. Conflicting orders left many units in disarray. Alexei and the Ukrainian leadership seized the moment, launching targeted operations against confused Russian forces. The coup partially succeeded. Putin remained but was weakened, with top officials arrested or fleeing. The war effort was in disarray. The coup shattered Putin's perceived invincibility. Protests erupted in Russia, and international pressure increased. Soon, Putin was forced to negotiate. Despite threats, he had to agree to a ceasefire and withdraw troops. Alexei, in his new Ukrainian uniform, stood beside a proud Taras as President Zelensky awarded them medals for valor. For unwavering dedication to freedom and justice, Zelensky declared. Ukraine honors you and all who stood with us. After the ceremony, Alexei and Taras found a quiet moment. So what now? Alexei asked. Taras smiled. Rebuilding, restoring villages, mending bridges. Alexei nodded. I'd like that to help heal the war's damage. I thought so, Taras replied. I've discussed a program for former Russian soldiers to help rebuild. Interested? Alexei smiled. A brilliant idea, a chance for redemption. More than that, Taras said. A chance to build something new and better. Looking over Kyiv, Alexei felt hope. The future was challenging but full of possibilities. To new beginnings, he said, raising an imaginary toast.